Welcome back. My name is Matt Reiners, and I'm one of the co-founders of Eversound, a company dedicated to improving quality of life for older adults by giving them the gift of hearing. Today, I'm joined by Justin Godderis, the Chief Revenue Officer of InTouchLink. I've gotten to know Justin on the conference circuit. We've spoken on panels together, and he's one of the good ones. He's one of those technology providers that truly cares and wants to help communities, their teams, and their residents. Thanks for joining me today, Justin.
Matt, thanks for having me, man. It's always a pleasure. I love talking industry with you, whether it's in person, virtually, or that virtual in person where we sit next to each other with two laptops and still use video calling for some reason. It's trending. I don't know why, but no, always a pleasure. So happy to be here.
I love it. I love it. And Justin, I know, so the last time we spoke together was at a conference, and I know we kind of kept going back and forth, and I think we have very similar beliefs to this, but who and why do you think are some of the unspoken heroes within senior living?
Oh, that's such a good question. I mean, it's hard to say just one, because you got to think about your RNs, your CSAs, CSNs, your maintenance staff, groundskeepers. IT. These folks are keeping the lights on figuratively all the time. Their sales teams, but the one that really kind of stands out to me, and I think these guys are just truly heroic, it's the activity and the wellness professionals. Talk about such a selfless sort of role that they have. Just keeping smiles on people's faces. And, especially when I think about, the pandemic happening and them having to get so creative, when it was the risk and it was the isolation and, staying on their toes, and just how did they keep people engaged and happy and not scared? My hat goes off to them. And I just look at the sheer volume of stuff they do, like even with, our system, we know because it tracks it. They, across these communities, even we see over 5.1 million activities or events that these folks are scheduling, and conducting on a regular basis. So it's just absolutely incredible. My hat's off to these folks.
Yeah. I have to agree. I think when I was first introduced to the senior living industry and got to know some activities professionals, like, they're truly just angels on earth. They're just like the kindest, like super hardworking, and just like are all about the resident experience and making sure that the residents are happy. And as you mentioned, continuing to put their smiles on their faces. And I'm curious, from your point of view, how do you think we as an industry can better support them?
I think, one of the best things we can do, again, thinking critically, as an industry, as organizations, is giving them more and more of a voice is kind of one. It's one of those things I've started to see happen a bit more, definitely in the last couple of years, but allowing them to sit at the table more often. So when it's, decisions that get made that fundamentally impacts, again, organization as a whole, or, the quality of life for residents, I think that's a big piece of it. And I think also, again, when we look at things like technology, is how are you utilizing this less from just, a sheer ROI perspective, but how are you using it to improve their bandwidth? Because again, they're running from floor to floor, they're conducting this, making changes. All this is, how do you facilitate that for them so it becomes easier and they can connect more with, again, the people that matter the most, which is the residents.
Yeah, I think technology definitely plays an important piece. And I think when people think of tech, right, they think it is something as will take over everything and anything. It's almost like, unfortunately, that yeah, exactly.
It's here. Yeah. T2.
It's the Terminator, right? And, I think it's more of a sidekick, right? And it's really there just to make life a little bit easier. And if you can automate some of those things that you have to do more than once, I know personally, I try and always look for opportunities to do that. And if we can kind of just help them to be more efficient and really putting some money behind that to invest in that technology to do that, I agree with you that it can definitely make that happen. And, I think when we talk about the activities professional, one of their main jobs is to better engage residents. But I'm curious, by your take, what does that actually mean? And what does that actually look like?
That is also a really good question, because obviously there are so many different segments of our industry, right? And you look at folks anywhere from the 55 plus to IL to AL to memory care to skill to, it goes on and on. I think it's using things like, could be technology, it could be traditional means, is trying to hone down on what really matters to the individuals. And I think some of that gets lost in translation sometimes, it's the old standbys of, we're always doing bingo. Like bingo is always a thing, not to say people don't love bingo, because who doesn't love bingo, but what are some other creative ways that, we can get people engaged? And part of what, again, I'm starting to see is even getting the residents involved in this sort of stuff, right? So what is actually going to make you happy? What are your expectations? Like, what is entertaining to you? Is it, do you want things that are more educational? And I think as, this industry evolves, I think that's the natural course. I think people are coming in now, if they're selling their home and they're moving in, that expectation is different, right? Is that I'm going to have something that's going to speak to me. So it's also a little bit more of that tailoring. And again, that's what makes someone feel, I think, like an individual, which is so important in this, right? It's not, you're all not just in this, this one complex or this neighborhood. Is, hey, I'm an individual person, but I've got things that speak to me specifically. I think that's really important.
Yeah. I mean, it's that person-centered approach, right? Like we all have different hobbies, we all have different likes, we all have different loves, and really trying to create an experience tailored to that. But if you can like find opportunities to do that for multiple people at the same time, it's like, that's kind of the ticket there. And I'm curious, when you look at it, a better engaged resident, what outcomes do you believe that has on the individual that is more engaged?
It's, it's even more than what I just think. It's even, you go back to risk, right? So risk of someone's health, as an example, is, there's studies that showed that from someone that is engaged from a cognitive standpoint, as well as from a physical standpoint, has a extended lifespan. It's a fact that is science. And I think that, for these individuals that get that right engagement, right, and through whatever means that is, I think there are two things I always like to think about, and it's really hard to quantify. It's the happiness and the, positivity factor, because, how do you measure that? But I think that, and so many times when you're structuring or thinking about this stuff, is everything should kind of roll up to that point of happiness. Because a happy person is going to live longer. They're going to have better social engagements with people. And again, falls back to that quality of life.
I would have to agree. And I think another way I've seen people think about happiness, and I think this kind of, is kind of perfectly fits in the engagement, is like that sense of purpose. And like that sense of purpose, if you're able to fulfill that, you'll be more happy. And if you have happy and you have purpose, I think the data is pretty telling and how that can help. One, because I mean, if you're not growing, right, if you're not fulfilling that purpose, then what's going on, right? I saw with my grandmother firsthand, who did not have any purpose, did not have any engagement. And it was sad. And she would just keep asking me when she was going to pass away. And like, being a loved one, that is not something you want to hear. But
and I had, similar experience with my grandmother. Although she passed away due to Alzheimer's, but it was in that progression point too. Again, it's just, even from her standpoint, and she ultimately was at a lovely community that, we encouraged her to move to. They managed to bring some of that back to her, is hey, let's get you engaged in stuff, right? What were the things that you love? She loved to dance, or she loved to sing, or these. So she has a purpose. And even, my grandfather is a perfect example. At 83, 84 years old, didn't have to do it. He'd wake up at 5 a.m. to chop wood when they didn't even have a fireplace. I don't know why he did it, but again, it's that sense of purpose, right? It's like, I have something to do, and I'm productive, and I'm, giving something back. I think it's part of human nature.
Yeah, absolutely. And hey, I mean, cutting wood is pretty fun, and you get to break some stuff. So I can definitely.
It's not, or like when you were a kid, breaking bottles behind a, building. I'm not saying I did that, but people have fun.
I plead the fifth on that myself, but And I know, Justin, like you're continuing to work with more and more communities and more organizations that, I've kind of seen this shift, and I imagine you have too, that are prioritizing the life enrichment team, the programming team, the activities team, the wellness team. How are you finding that can drive some of the community's most important business outcomes and priorities?
So that I think is a critical thing. And I think people are now starting to look at this from a different lens, right? Because when you look departmentally at organizations, it was, okay, sales and marketing, 100%, that is what's going to, support everything. And then we need to have your more traditional systems, your ERP structures, your scheduling, email, all that kind of good stuff. But what people are now looking at, and the two, I think I hear it from communities all the time, the biggest struggles, and I think we all know this, it's been occupancy and it's been staffing have been, major issues. The benefits of really focusing on the engagement side of the equation is that you're going to have people who are prospective residents or family members when they're looking from the outside in, and there's visibility to say, look at what they do, right? It's not that expectation of the, Grandpa Simpson looking out the window, in this room on a dreary day. It's, hey, we've got excursions, we've got, tons of events where we're getting people together. We've got educational things that is going to help people make decisions about, moving into this community. And secondarily, by virtue of that, the people coming in, then the retention is better. So the retention of people, and it happens all the time. People will say, I'm not quite sad, I don't feel truly engaged at this place, so I'm going to go look elsewhere. By focusing on the engagement, it's going to keep the people staying there. And again, that has that trickle effect, like we were just talking about, the happiness, the wellness, that's going to keep your resident happier for longer, and thusly will also, make their stay with you longer. So it's a huge drive that is, it is really supporting sort of these budgetary expectations where everyone's, having to, cut budgets and rejig, but it's a huge thing. People need to think about it more often.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think if there is a silver lining coming out of the pandemic, or, we might even still be in it, is that renewed spotlight on how important it is, right? I think the data was very telling, and in terms of, and I think of the opposite of engagement or, purpose, and it's more of like isolation and loneliness, and the data was telling, and how that can impact one's well-being. And I think it's almost becoming necessary to invest in these departments, and the communities that will continue to see that their business outcomes. And to your point, right? If someone's there, they're going to be happier. Word of mouth. We're both in marketing and sales. We know that how important that is. And, if the adult children are happy where mom and dad are, they know they're engaged, they know they're having fun, they're going to tell other people about that when those questions come up. And we all trust our peers probably more so than anybody else, almost to a fault. And, I think when we're thinking about the life enrichment teams, right, there's this natural trend to really adopt resident engagement technology. And where do you think that comes in the fold to better support some of these teams?
Well, I think, and that's it, so with the investment, and I'll give you your shout out, because I do love your product, actually. So like, as an example with yours, is that there's that human engagement side of the equation, right? So it's fostering, or with ours or a million other platforms, it's fostering that feeling of happiness for sure. But from a staff perspective, the biggest thing that happens with that investment in technology is that we already spoke about, it's the opening up of bandwidth, but you're also creating satisfaction for those staff members. That's a big part of it. When I've talked to so many of them, and you look at the laundry list of items that they have to tackle on a regular basis, without the right tools or the right systems to manage all this stuff, it can feel very insurmountable. And they have to do this. And you talked all, I would say, again, that group, probably some of the most altruistic people I've ever encountered in my life. I mean, and not only does it benefit those existing staff members, again, allowing them to better support the residents, but it certainly has an impact on people deciding to work at X community. So if I am, in the market and I'm looking to start, and there are, 2 or 3 different communities I could join, whether it's, starting as an intern, or it could be directly an activity coordinator, it could be anybody else. When I see, hey, this organization has these things lined up, right, in an automated fashion. And so I'm able to accomplish my job, what I'm really trying to get done, in a more efficient manner, so much easier. There's a repository of things that I can utilize. The information is there. I don't have to rewrite the script, so to speak. I may be more inclined to join this organization versus another. And that's a huge component of this is, just like anything else, when someone's identifying which organizations they're going to join, what's the benefits package, right? What are those type of things? What are the extra ads that I get from this spot? So just knowing that, the organization I'm joining has all this ready to roll for me, I think it's a critical deciding factor for these folks.
I would have to agree. And I think one of the interesting things I've seen pop up, because, I think we've all experienced kind of those mergers and acquisitions or management companies changing hands. And some of our partners have gone and taken over communities where they kind of come in with this technology suite, let's call it. And the people in the staff I see are pumped. They're like, finally, a group that's going to actually invest in me and sees the importance of my role. Like, I can only imagine what that does for retention, right? Like, even just thinking, if you're working, if you know that the higher ups believe in your department, believe in what you're doing, and putting some budgetary dollars behind that to make you and your team successful, like, that's got to feel good. I know personally, I've been experiences on both sides of the coin, and I would rather be in the group where some of the higher ups that I might not have a direct conversations with understand the importance of my role. And that's what it's all about.
They're going to look at this and they're going to make that decision. I know. And I mean, I'm sure you've heard horror stories. I mean, even just talking to communities in the last, few months, where you've got EDs that, because of, attrition of staff members, they're in the kitchen. They had to run into the kitchen to actually go and prep meals. There's some instances like this to actually keep things running. Right. So, and in having some of these conversations, they're stretched. If things were easier and more automated for them to be able to pump out, information or engage people, and again, make it more attractive for someone new to join, that's really it. That's the stuff.
Yeah. And, I know you work with communities all across the country and in Canada as well. And I'm wondering what you're noticing with your own partners I know we've kind of hit on a few things, but if there's any specific themes you're seeing come out from your partners as technology adoption really becomes the standard.
I think if I could put it all into, one concept, it is now allowing for more voices to be part of this decision-making process. And I really do see that, and I really hear it so much more. There's still barriers, absolutely. But I've seen an interesting trend, again, of these sort of resident family members, staff, almost, councils, so to speak, where they're posing the questions. They're asking the questions to say, hey, we know we need to refine certain things here, right? There are better ways to do this. Absolutely. It's you can, throw a rock and you're going to hit a technology company nowadays. Right? That's a fact. But what are the things that actually matter to you? And so as a family member, is that I want to make sure that my loved one is having a great time here, right? Or maybe I want to have more proactive communication or visibility or communication tools, or know that it's supporting, my particular loved one has hearing loss or macular degeneration, or, what do you have available for them? From the resident side, a lot of times it boils down to what's on the menu, but it may be, hey, how do I get, easier access to what's available for dinner, right? That's really important to me. Or do I know that there's a variety of things, right? Again, I love documentaries. Is there educational stuff? Is there, music? I love to dance. Is there ballroom stuff here? And then from a staff perspective, it's now I'm trying to address all of these needs for the resident and the family member. I'm also trying to, for my executive team, I'm trying to do everything obviously within budget efficiently and trying to manage all of these things. So what's now imperative for me, and how do I connect those dots? And I think it's really, because there are more voices in the room, it's starting to make it less scary, the idea of adopting this technology of any kind, where, you know, it's not going to be one isolated thing, and you know, how do we squeeze this in? So there are more parallels that they can draw now, and they can understand where it's connecting all these points, you know, positively affecting the organization, affecting the relationships with the residents, keeping the family members satisfied, making the staff feel great on a day-to-day basis. Even on the most stressful of days, at least they know, hey, it'll be a bit better than it was before. And so I wholly expect, with, you know, what we've seen, I'm sure you've probably seen in, you know, the last year or two, is that a lot of that fear is being removed, because now they know so many people need to utilize this stuff.
Yeah, I think it's really come out behind the curtain, right? And like more people are having, and kind of we're forced to embrace it too, right? And it's just like this thing where there's more people involved and into that. And, you know, Justin, I'll give you my final question here. It's always my favorite. You know, apart from investing in InTouchLink, if you could give senior living providers just 3 guiding principles as they move forward and, you know, plan for the next 6, 12 months, what would you share?
Talk to your families and residents 100%, and listen. Talk to your staff members. Again, a lot of those unsung heroes have amazing ideas, and a lot of times that trickles back up. And thirdly, look at the future. And that's sort of a higher level kind of term, but think about what the next generation of folks that are coming in are going to need. Right now, the expectation is this. In 5 years, it's going to be this. And if you can start preparing for all of those potential components, you're going to be far ahead. And I promise you, you're going to get the people in who are going to be smiling, and they're going to stay smiling. Have to do it.
I love it. Well, thank you, Justin, so much for joining me today. I know our listeners will really and thoroughly enjoy this. So I just want to, you know, from my soul to yours, I'm super grateful for you, Justin. I'm so happy that our paths have crossed. I'm excited for what the future holds.
Likewise. Thanks again, Matt. Always a pleasure.